Welcome, everyone, to the St. Pete by Night Twitch stream where we play St. Petersburg by Night, a massive multiplayer 5th edition World of Darkness Chronicle set in St. Petersburg by Florida. I'm Kent, also known as Mishikent on all social media. I am the lead storyteller and host of St. Pete by Night After Dark, which is what you're watching right now. It's our behind-the-scenes kind of behind the curtain show where we talk to players, we talk to storytellers, we talk to dice makers, we talk to people all about St. Pete by Night as well as the greater World of Darkness as a whole. If you've tuned in the last few weeks, you've seen us interview some of our storytellers. You saw us discuss the Darkness Emergent event that we attended. Tonight, we have a very unique and special opportunity where we are going to be talking to some of the newer members of the St. Pete by Night community, people who have been on the server less than a year or so, less than 6 months, some of them even just over a couple of months now. They're new to the community, new to our game, and possibly a varying degree of experience within the World of Darkness. So let's take a moment to let these amazing players introduce themselves. Go ahead and take it away.
Hi, my name is Nathan, and I am playing a new conflicted young Ventru on the Graveyard Shift, which hopefully you'll be able to see in some format soon. You can find some of my work in the World of Darkness over on the Dice Cult at YouTube, and I'm super excited to be here.
Howdy, I'm Olive. I'm actually playing in a Hunter game right now. Undetermined whether or not we'll be doing any form sort of streamed content, but that's something to keep an eye out in the future. Just in case, I play a rather brazen hunter named Hawthorne, and you can find me on TikTok at Arbiter of Chaos.
Hello, my name is Damien. I've been playing Vampire the Masquerade since actually before the game launched in 1989. They brought it to one of the games fairs in the UK and they premiered it there. So I played it there and bought it the moment it came out, and I've been the perennial storyteller ever since. This is the first time I've actually been able to play in 30 years? You can find me on social media at Damien T. Gerard. That's it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Pat. Walks the Web on the server. I'm playing a Nosferatu, a deeply troubled and trauma-bombed Nosferatu tropey, if it is. You can find me at The Wedding PM on TikTok, where I cover miniature painting, and I'm about to start prop making. So come say hi.
That is amazing, and honestly, just in those introductions alone, I've heard so much that I'm so excited to get into, especially Damien having been involved in World of Darkness since before its inception. Now, I thought I'd been involved a long time, since the mid-90s, but we'll get to that. That's just super duper exciting. Besides following all these amazing players, which you really, really do need to do, make sure to follow St. Pete by Night. We're on all the social medias, pretty much that you can find, including TikTok, Instagram, X/Twitter/ whatever it's going to be called next. And YouTube, where you can catch up on the past streams of St. Pete by Night, including our Rage Across Tampa series, which takes place every Tuesday at 10 p.m. It's our Werewolf the Apocalypse game. And in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be debuting some Vampire the Masquerade content as our Don't Get Caught storyline begins airing hopefully next week. That's what we're hoping for.
Cool.
So stay tuned to that. Check out our schedule and make sure that you're up to date on all things St. Pete by Night. The other thing that I'm super excited to announce is that we are having a dice giveaway tonight. We are going to have a special set of dice given away. If you are watching this very stream right now, you could qualify for that dice giveaway. And let me make sure I have the exact keyword right before I say it wrong. It is going to be #DiceMePLZ. That is our keyword. Dice me, please. So if you would like to be entered into that giveaway, make sure to use hashtag Dice Me Please to be entered into the giveaway to win a set of your very own World of Darkness dice made by one of our many, many amazing dice makers. But we're not going to be announcing that until the very end of the show. So, hold on to your butts and stay tuned in for the content that we are going to be talking about tonight. So, let's get into it. I'm very, very interested to learn all of your various experiences within the World of Darkness, within Vampire the Masquerade or Hunter the Reckoning or Werewolf the Apocalypse, Wraith. There's so many different avenues in which to come into the World of Darkness, but let's take it one by one. How long have you known or been participating in the World of Darkness as a whole? Nathan, let's go ahead and start with you.
Well, so this is maybe apropos nothing, just to date myself, is I grew up in a comic book store in the mid 90s. So it was everywhere in in the mid 90s in America. But I was always just a little bit too young to play at that particular moment. And then, I think I officially became an adult, and then the game came out, Bloodlines, and I'm still in love with that. It's like almost like a yearly pilgrimage.
It's a perfect video game. Like, even
Yeah.
though it's so old, even though it's considered outdated and the graphics are so, it is one of the best RPGs I think that has possibly ever been
Yeah.
released on lines with like Dragon Age and other games that just have a complete story, great gameplay, and it has replayability even all these years later. Like, I feel like you could still step into
People keep
Bloodlines.
making new stuff too.
100%. 100%.
People get like, I go back and find something new that someone's made or that just was in the original and I just never found before. It's nuts. But yeah, it's just
there's
part
such
of
a
my life.
high bar for Bloodlines too, as well. So I feel like
Yeah.
they really better bring it, or else it is going to be a massive problem for them. But that's very cool. So you got in about
Yeah.
the same
Mhm.
time I did, in like the mid to late 90s, where it was kind of unavoidable.
I never got to play though. So it was always this like distant thing that was so cool that I never got to play.
Absolutely.
And so I never played this. I never played World of Darkness until 5th edition.
Oh, really?
Till
Okay.
like, yeah, and I mean, I own the books, owned them for years, never got to play. Until 5th edition came out, and I just screw it. I'm scouring the internet for a game. And I found the Dice Cult was advertising one. And unfortunately, the initial burst of it fell through, and I was like, I'm not letting this happen. I'll just take over as storyteller. This is happening.
Yeah, we're doing this. We're
It
absolutely
cannot
doing this.
It cannot fail. And it was, and I've never, like, I've been role playing for years. D&D, L5R, the John Wick stuff, really. That for years, had a stable group for years. So I've been a player for a long time. But after like decades of being a player, I was like, oh, I have to be a storyteller now.
Yeah, I've got to try my hand at it.
It's just got to go. It's just got to happen. And that's my history with World of Darkness.
That's amazing.
When we have a great campaign over on the Dice Cult. It is me fumbling through being a storyteller for the first time. It's a different flavor, I think, than a lot of World of Darkness stuff, because I really wanted to put the players on the clock. It's a lot more of like a season of the show 24. I don't love that show or anything, but it's just the immediacy of it. Like, yes, you have to
feel that.
Yes, you have to feed, and yes, every hour of the clock is accounted for. I mean, not narratively, like I'll make time for you, like if you want to do something, but I just want you to feel the pressure of daylight and the need for blood.
That's amazing. Well, I definitely recommend people go check it out. I actually got to see a preview of it myself when Nathan and that group first joined the game, and I really enjoyed it. So I definitely recommend everyone go check out the Dice Cult and see what they're doing over there. So let's transition to Olive. Olive, how long have you been involved in the World of Darkness as a whole, and when, what did you first hear about it, or when did you first hear about it?
Let's see. I'm probably on the younger end here, and I only relatively recently got into it all. I believe it's going to be about 2 years in February.
Okay.
And I heard about it, some inklings of it on TikTok, and I was like, okay, this seems interesting. I want to try this out, And so like, I kind of did what anyone does, and like, hey, let's try and find a game, and scoured the internet. And my first server I actually joined was a San Francisco by Night, which is a play-by-post server that I didn't stick around long in because I don't like play-by-post all that much. But it was it was an interesting introduction to the world of darkness. I started off and vampire as one does, and I bounced around from a few different servers. I can't remember all of them, and trying to find a more like traditional like sit down and play game. And I finally found one. I was in a couple at one point. I was in an LA by night game that I really enjoyed. Ended up having to leave that one prematurely due to my life getting in the way. And then I was also in a Chicago by night game that kind of does what I mean when you run a game for long enough, chances are it's going to fizzle out, and kind of happened
Absolutely.
there.
Scheduling is the ultimate
Yeah.
bane of TTRPGs as a whole. I think everybody has experienced a point in their life or in their gaming experience where it's just like
Yeah.
something makes the game fall apart, whether it's your own life, whether it's another player's life, the
Yeah.
storyteller, whoever. Like just it's the ultimate bane for sure.
It really is. And then relatively recently, about back in August, I started running my own game for the first time. I run an Anarch game for some friends set in Vegas. It's been a really fun experience to not only run a game, but just like see the joy in my players' face, because it's one of those like I'm still figuring it out as I go, being a new storyteller and be like, okay, like let's see where this goes, and it's been fun. But as for when I started, I believe I came to the St. Pete around, I think it was like May, if I remember correctly. So I've been around for a little bit. I remember it was kind of towards the end of like what was going on before, and I was like,
Yeah,
oh, I think a
before we
great time to
finish the iteration. Yeah, we'll get into the
yeah, I was
St. Pete
like,
experience in a minute. But I
yeah,
do. That's awesome that I think everybody's trying their hands at storytelling. I think that's the only way to truly learn is to just go for it. Like, yes, you can watch others and you can get the experience of like playing a bunch, but it's just one of those situations where you just got to jump in and try it. And there is nothing more rewarding than watching players enjoy a story you're telling. Like that is
oh, for sure.
so ultimately rewarding. And it's so cool that you've also, been doing the storyteller thing. I think that's so cool. And we might even get into a storyteller discussion here because I think everyone has tried their hands at it at least once. Yeah. Okay.
I
Um,
think so, yeah.
Damien, I am going to come back to you in a second because there are going to be so many follow up questions. So, Pat,
So,
let's hear about your World of Darkness experience. When did you first encounter the game, and when did you really start playing and getting into it?
well, I started a lot like most of the people here in the mid '90s. My first book was not vampire though. The first book that I ever picked up was a first edition werewolf book.
Okay.
So I picked that up. Luckily, I had the benefit of having parents that had absolutely no idea what role playing games were. But my mother bought me any book that I could get my hands on because she was just happy that I was reading. So I was able to get quite a few books and quite a big collection quickly, but not really with any kind of players. I did eventually wander myself onto the internet in the mid '90s and cut my teeth in World of Darkness, playing in the IRC chat rooms and the poster boards that were rampant during that time. Yeah, I see Damien's nodding. Yeah, they were rampant during that time frame. And it was the Wild West. There was barely rules, barely anybody was keeping track of anything. Um, and so after a while, I decided, this is interesting, and it taught me a lot of lessons. I now am going to go out and find people. So I eventually gathered a large group, and we consumed as much World of Darkness as we could possibly run. And Vampire, more often than not, was the last thing that I found myself into. I was mostly into Werewolf and Changeling. But I did have friends that absolutely were in love with Vampire, and I appreciated it deeply for what it was and what the setting provided.
Yeah.
Um, and then I kind of off again, on again, here and there, until probably mid 2010s. I got back into it. And then the classic tale, always a bride, never a bridesmaid. I never got to play. So I have been a permanent storyteller since then, until I found myself here. And I could not be happier to have a place that I could go hide from my players, and play myself and just enjoy it.
Well, I'm so excited to talk to all of you about your storytelling experiences and kind of takeaways about the process. So we're gonna do some of that. I gotta cut out some time for that because I did not know that all four of you had storyteller experience. So that's a whole amazing other discussion. So we'll get to that. To everyone watching, because we are going to launch into something very fascinating, I think, and not that it hasn't been so far. You can ask questions in the chat as we go, and we will read them out live on the air. So if you have questions for any of our guests, if you have questions about World of Darkness, if you have questions about St. Pete by Night, if you're watching, you can ask a question in the chat, and you will hopefully be, if I catch it, I will make sure to read it out, and we'll have our guests or myself answer it. Damien, you got to effectively, from what, if I'm understanding correctly, you got to play test Vampire the Masquerade before it was released.
Yeah.
Spin me a yarn, because I am absolutely flabbergasted at the notion of this.
So every year I used to go to a games festival in the UK called Reading Games Fair. It was in April every year. I first started going there in about 1981, I think, something like that. And what they would do is they would launch new games there. So I play tested Cyberpunk 2013 before it launched as well, because they brought that along. And so they brought along Vampire the Masquerade. And it had been on my radar for a while anyway. I've been role-playing since 1976 by that point, so 14 years already. And I'm fascinated by horror. I'm a big horror fan. So I just gravitated naturally towards Vampire the Masquerade when they brought it out. And at the time that they brought it over, the only thing they had was the first edition book. There were no splat books. There was nothing. Chicago by Night hadn't come out yet. And I think that was the first book that got released pretty shortly after the game
absolutely.
released. So, but they had a scenario. They'd already genned something up. And it wasn't long, it was only a few hours, but they just wanted to run a group of players through. And I think what they wanted to do was break the system. They wanted us to break the system, to like min-max, to power game, just to see what we could do that they could then pare back and fix so that it wasn't just too overpowered. Now, what we didn't know at the time is that they had already factored in Werewolf for the year after, and then Mage for the year after that, and then Changeling for the year after that, and we didn't know any of that stuff. And of course, they have to get that balance in place so that it's reasonable, at least, between the various different supernatural creatures. But I met Mark Reinhagen back at the time as well. And,
great follow on TikTok, by the way. If you're not following Mark Reinhagen, go follow him. He is actually a very interactive TikToker. Anyway, please continue.
Yeah. And I met the artist, the main artist from the Vampire books, whose name completely gone out of my head. And yeah, so we just spent a few hours playing that. And the moment the game released, I picked it up and I started running my own campaign before any of the splat books came out. And as they started to come out, I started to incorporate them. So like when the Succubus Club book came out, London, which is where I based my games, suddenly had a Succubus Club, and I used the same maps and layout and everything. I changed the owners, but I used that layout. And as the rest of them came along, all the clan books, all the Black Dog books as well, when they came out, I would get all of those and incorporate everything. And, to the point where I've got like my pride and joy, which is my leather bound V20 vampire book, which you can't see, which is like silver spine and everything else as well. So I was one of the first people to get this book when it first released, whenever that was. Nice. And but I've always been a storyteller. So the campaign that I ran was my own story, and I actually ended that on the stroke of midnight, New Year's Eve, 1999, in real world. So I ended the campaign just as the millennia changed, basically, because I thought that was a nice time to end it.
Yeah.
And then since then, I've only played. I think I played 13 sessions, including the St. Pete by Night one, in 33 years. That's it.
Well, hopefully that's something that we're going to remedy. Now that you're a part of the community and in the game, I'd love to have you as a player at one of my tables at some point. And that's kind of the beauty of this new model that we are exercising, is that there are all these storytellers, all these stories, all happening simultaneously in one world. And the storytellers will be shifting tables, and we'll be, trading off tables, and we'll be able to have a vast variety. And kind of going back to the whole, conversation about scheduling, that's what really motivated this for me. I know the Bane. I've been playing for 30 years, and I know that kind of struggle of finding a table consistently, of finding people to play with consistently, and how difficult that can be. And so that's why I wanted to do this. I wanted to have a game that you could play when you wanted to, when you were able to, and have, people to play with, a variety of people to play with. And while it's changed and gone through some growing pains and some lumps over the 2 years we've been active, I'm glad to see it still going today, and that people like yourselves are all joining. So this actually brings a great question from the chat, which comes from Mimic, one of our storytellers, also known as Bon Clancy. She asked, what tables and characters are you playing in St. Pete by Night right now? So Nathan, go ahead and start us off, and we'll just go through the order.
So I'm playing a new arrival young Ventru from out of state, coming with a coterie to the graveyard shift, inhabiting St. Anthony's Hospital in St. Pete by Night. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's gonna be a really interesting dynamic in the group. I'm not the only Ventru in the group, so we're gonna have the two poles interacting.
Absolutely.
And I'm excited about that. There's the Ventru that knows that is Snoop Dogg is the man with the plan, and then there's me.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to airing the Graveyard Shift sessions. That is run by another one of our storytellers, Caffeinatrix. I've known her for 25 years, and I know that you're in for a treat working with her. I've story told for her. I was one of the first games she played in Vampire, and she has grown and become so experienced and amazing in the game. So I do look forward to that.
She's already because I only have like my own tiny little experience to go off of. Like, just having another storyteller slow things down. Be like, you can build. You don't have to put your foot on the gas pedal all the time. You got to build characters and let them do what they're gonna do and interact. And she just kicked it off, letting us be ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
With just like little nudges, and it's been great.
That's fantastic. So Olive, what character are you playing, and in which game?
So my character, Hawthorne, she's in a hunter game right now, run by the lovely Cole, and which our cell name is a New Renaissance. And it's definitely been an experience, like learning to play hunter. Hunter was definitely fairly easy to get into, with my background in vampire, but it definitely does play different to vampire. And it is one of those things where there's a lot of things that's okay, let's kind of test the water, see how this goes, and I feel like my character brings a lot of this energy to it that that you don't get from the others, because it's they're underground, which basically their background is they are an ex arms dealer for the Mexican cartel. And so they kind of ended up in St. Pete just to kind of lay low for a bit,
That's very interesting. The St. Pete story, especially in the first iteration, had a very interesting interaction with the Mexican cartel. So we'll see how Cole decides to interweave that, and see if she draws upon that at all for the story that she's telling you. But that's fantastic.
Cole, you know what?
And one of the wonderful things about 5th edition, I feel, more than any edition in the past, has been the ability to kind of more easily transition settings. The kind of the change between like werewolf and vampire and hunter in the older editions was caused whiplash. Like there were some similarities between them all, but there were some drastic differences as well. There was no balance between them. You couldn't have a vampire and a werewolf in the same game. But I think 5th edition has really kind of found a really good rhythm to introduce new splats and have them not be too much of a learning curve from the previous splat. So that's really cool. So you are trying Hunter for the first time in St. Pete by Night.
I am, yeah, and it's definitely been a very unique experience, and I'm enjoying every minute of it.
That's fantastic. Damien, same question goes to you. What character and what game are you playing in right now?
So I'm in Mimic's game. I think that's called Good Girl's Blood, I think. And I'm playing a Banu Hakim corporate assassin. So I'm a lawyer, and I'm CEO actually of a law firm that spans the world. And so we specialize in getting people into the country, sort of immigration, as it were, as well as getting people out of the country, that sort of stuff. But also defending criminal cases as well, predominantly for the clan, admittedly, but anyone else if they're willing to pay.
They're willing to pay. That's amazing. So we've also had some history with big lore-based law firms. Ballard, Anderson, and Bateman from Chicago has a presence in Tampa, so we'll be interested to see how that might cross over as well. But that's very, very cool. I love when people play the more intellectual side of Banu Hakim. Like, I think when a lot of people first come to Vampire, they often think like, well, the Banu Hakim, they're going to be the rogues or assassins. You know, they come in with that D&D mindset of like, it's got to be this way. And so they often get very kind of stereotyped or very like put into a box. And so when we have people play who know just how deep that Banu Hakim well can go and the variety of types of characters you can make as a Banu, that makes me very excited because I really don't want to see another assassin ninja that just kind of shows up just because they're Banu Hakim. I think there's just so much more to it. So that makes me very excited to hear that. So Pat, same question. What character and what game are you playing in?
Well, I am playing in a game with our illustrious host, Dead Man's Hand. I play Levi Lansky, who is a Nosferatu. He immigrated to the country sometime around the late 40s as a young child from Poland, and his family is the Lansky family, which is a notorious Jewish mobster family. So he ended up down in Miami working some stuff for his uncle. Caught the eye of a few people because he was able to get in and get things done inside places. So the Nosferatu picked him up. It wasn't snatched out of the streets. It was a deal was made, hands were shook. I became a Nosferatu. It was very business. Established himself in Tampa recently-ish, due to the fall of Miami. So now I decided I wanted to play a character who had a backstory that brought me into the server, not knowing much because I don't, as a person, know much of the history of St. Pete. So I had myself be a recent transplant, and now he finds himself surrounded by Malkavians and Toreadors, and things are getting real weird. And he's getting real paranoid, and that's the way these games go when it comes to mysteries.
I absolutely have just enjoyed that chronicle so far and enjoyed playing with you as a player. It's been kind of a story that's been in the writing since before the first iteration of this game, before the existence of St. Pete by Night. The story of Ates, the original sheriff of St. Pete by Night, and his relationship with Isabel as the prince, the Toreador prince of St. Pete by Night, and kind of the fallout of everything that happened after both of their passing. and kind of some unfinished business, as it were. So I've been really enjoying that game, and I've been absolutely thrilled to have you as a player. So the next question comes from the chat. Let me see if I can find it here. The question was, how did you join? How did you find St. Petersburg by Night, and how did you end up joining? What kind of encouraged you to join? Nathan, we'll start with you.
So it was really the desperate search for another game after mine ended. I tried a couple of other servers, just starting on the World of Darkness one, and St. Pete just stood out as the most organized and sane also. It's
Well, I'm
it's
glad we're fooling people. That's great. No,
I
please
mean,
continue.
you're I mean, if we're throwing out backhanded compliments, you're over the low bar.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad. We can just step right over it. It's nice.
Yeah. So I selfishly, I just wanted to be a player. And St. Pete was like the ability to do that just from heaven.
Yeah.
And that's been great so far.
No, I know the struggle of being a forever storyteller. I know, someone's got to do the job, and it's not always glamorous and it's not always fun, but you want to play the game, and if this is the best way to get into it, you're going to do it. But then that was another inspiration for this particular game, and the way we're doing it is I wanted people to be able to play. I wanted to have a surefire way to get into a game. No matter what your experience was, whether you're brand new to World of Darkness or whether you're just stuck as a storyteller for your own group, you could step in and be a player here. So that makes me very happy to hear that was kind of a motivating factor for you. Olive, same question. What brought you to and encouraged you to join St. Pete by Night?
I'm trying to remember exactly, because I believe I joined back in, I want to say it was like April or May, and I heard bits and pieces of it at that point, like on TikTok, and I was kind of hesitant at that point, because like how it sounded to me was another play-by-post server, which, as I say, I don't like play-by-post all that much. And I was like, nah. But then finally, I believe it was Darlene, I saw that I was like, okay, I might give this a try. And I joined, and it's like, well, I guess I'm gonna be waiting a while.
Yeah, you came in at a time where we were kind of reaching a point where we needed to take a break and reorganize things. So I'm glad that you stuck around, first and foremost, knowing that we had like a 3-month break coming where we were redoing some things and organizing it. But
yeah, and the funny thing is, I almost didn't end up in a game because like I wasn't like super active at that point, and it's like, oh hey, and like so I didn't like make any connections yet, and like I had I had someone like reach out to me, he's like, oh, you want to join our vampire game? I'm like, oh sure, I can do that. Then they kind of just, I never heard back from them. And I was like, okay. And then like last minute, they were like, hey, we have a hunter game, or like it was some game. And I was like, hey, would you mind joining our group? Like, sure. And it just worked out that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Damien.
So I joined right back at the very, very end of the last season, right before the revamp. Because I was playing in a D&D game with Mimic on a different server. And I also found St. Petersburg by Night, I think, from a Reddit post as well.
That's news to me. I didn't even know we had a Reddit post.
No, I think somebody mentioned it. I don't think it was like an official post, but somebody mentioned St. Pete by Night. And the problem I have out here is none of my friends want to play Vampire the Masquerade. None of them out here. So they want to play D&D. And I love D&D. D&D 5e is fantastic. It gets people into the game, but I want to play Vampire. So
I know the feeling.
So what I did is I joined the server. And then I joined lots of different Vampire servers trying to find a game. And after a while, I ended up leaving quite a few of them. I actually left this one by accident, thinking it was a different server. And then Mimic actually said, oh, you just left the server. Did you mean to do that? I'm like, oh, no, I didn't. So I had to rejoin again. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
Mimic's
how I found it.
one of our best headhunters, to be honest. Like it's one of the things that I tip my cap to about her, because she is so involved in the TTRPG community as a whole. I do not know how this amazing person balances their schedule the way they do, with all the one shots and campaigns and everything that she's involved in. But she has brought so many amazing community members to our community. And she keeps tabs on people. If she brought you in, she's going to keep tabs on you until you're gone, to make sure that you're enjoying yourself and that you don't leave on accident. But that's fantastic. I'm really glad to hear that she was one of the reasons that you came here. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to find us on Reddit too. I did not realize we were being talked about there.
I didn't know that either. Like that's where I was looking primarily
Yeah.
for vampire groups, and but I didn't see anything about it on Reddit.
I think
that's
it was in like
surprising.
one of the LFG channels. Somebody just made it a mention of it in
Okay.
passing.
Amazing.
Okay.
So Pat, how did you find St. Pete by Night?
So I actually saw a post for it in my local community's LFG Facebook group. So I reached out to the person who posted it, which was surprise Mimic. And they directed me to the server, and I joined. And I'll get into later my first impressions upon joining the server, because I think I joined kind of in the middle of the redoing of everything. So I had a lot of catching up to do. A bit daunting, but yeah, that's how I came to find out what was going on. And I like I didn't think that I was going to get in to anything at any point. I thought I was just going to be a spectator for a while until I became friends with people or something. But as soon as the groups went up, I got snatched up by a group of people, and they really wanted me there, and here I am.
And I'm so glad that they did too. That particular group is made up of some of our moderators who've been here since day one. A nice variety of people in that group, and I'm really glad that they brought you in. And it's been, like I said, it's been amazing having you at the table. So my next question for all of you would be: what were your first impressions upon joining the server, good, bad, or otherwise? I mean, this has been an experiment. To say it simply, this whole thing has been an experiment that luckily has lasted 2 years and has gone through a lot of shifts and changes and growing pains, including the biggest one, which was our decision to end the original iteration of the game, to remodel it and bring it back under this new revamp, as it were. So what were your first experiences or first impressions coming into this? Nathan, we'll start with you.
I learned a lot about Discord upon arriving here for the first time. Learned about beta chat, learned about threads. I don't know that that's really a problem though. I guess it's a problem if people can't figure it out. And also you can find, I guess this is an actual problem, is that you find old information in places. In character creation and stuff, when you're like looking around for like how do I make a character on St. Pete by Night, you can easily run into old stuff. And that's, I mean, like your server is almost software at this point. Right? It has to be like refactored and cared for like a dying animal.
Absolutely.
No.
Absolutely. I mean,
wow.
yeah, it did go through, like I said, big growing pains. We did have to go through and really dig through 2 years of information, from all the way back to the inception of the server. And yeah, so we are still finding things that we're like, oh, that's not accurate anymore. We got to delete that post. You're like, oh, this doesn't work anymore. And that's why it took us 3 months plus to get back up and running again, is that we did really want to find as much of that as possible and remove it. But yeah, it can be a bit overwhelming at first.
And I probably joined in the I don't know, spring of this year. So I saw the ending of it, of the last iteration, and we just we kind of, and it probably was really healthy for us, because we came in as just a group, almost preformed, to be like, okay, we can't really fully make nuts and bolts characters, but you can sit down and think about the story that you want and the relationships between these characters and their world, and just come in with as much as much help as you can give to a storyteller.
Right.
Because they don't like we can all figure out how many dots in Dominate we have later.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the easiest part.
Yeah, it's just kind of finding and creating the character concepts and how they're going to gel, and also walking into a world that is 18 months pre-established. Like, we've had, positions played by characters and players. We've had story that's been unfolding, and as a new player coming in, you have to be like, well, how much of this do I actually know? And how much don't I know? Because there's a lot that's happened here, and that can seem very intimidating at first. And also trying to make sure that what you're proposing is going to fit in the setting. And I think that's another thing to kind of overcome is this, what lore are we using here? What is canon in this particular setting versus possibly settings you've run or played in before? So I totally understand that.
And it was good because like we in as far as our interaction with St. Pete, we tried to keep it pretty vague. And what was fun about is getting with Calf for the first time is figuring out that these ideas, like being around a hospital, they just come de facto with certain connections into St. Pete.
Mm-hmm.
Not like like RP connections, right? Like there's just no way this character doesn't know you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And
which is it's cool. It's a cool way to be plugged into the world. That's 100%. A real big plus. Is like, you come in with something vague and St. Pete can just like take it and run with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the benefit to that pre-established world is we can say like, okay, you want to play a doctor, for example. Well, here are all the other people who played doctors previously, and they're going to be SPCs for you, or you're going to have this kind of knowledge that we could present to you because of the fact that we have developed this world that is fleshed out with hospitals and people involved in certain facets. Yeah, that's amazing. Olive, what was your first impression coming into St. Pete?
So as I came in like right at the end of the previous iteration, and I'm not gonna lie, it's like I was a bit bummed out that I kind of missed out of it. It was like, oh, I'm gonna have to wait because I was like itching to play more vampire at that point, and so it's like, but like at that point, it's like I kind of just moved out in the middle of nowhere. That's a whole story, and so but yeah, otherwise it's like otherwise, I mean, it was a lot of information to kind of parse through, and I was like, I'm probably not gonna necessarily need all of this at the moment, and so I wasn't super active in the server at that point, just because there was a lot going on in my life, and it was just hard to keep up with. But like finally, it's like, well, once like things were kind of smoothed over, and like my life started to die down, and I was like, okay. I was like, I can kind of get into this, and it was a very unique experience, and I wasn't entirely sure what to expect of it. But overall, I was like, I've enjoyed the process so far, and like I found like it's fairly easy and simple, like to access, and kind of it's been streamlined quite a bit. There is one thing, however, that I will point out that I didn't know until like we were already like well into to our game is that I didn't even know that St. Pete had a website.
That's actually a rather new development. That is something that did start with the revamp. I had not intended for us to have a website at first because it was just one more thing over all the things that we had. We had been using just the Discord as our website, so to speak, for the longest time.
That makes sense.
Then we brought Kyrie, and Kyrie is a wizard. Kyrie is magical.
Carl has spoken highly of them, and so I get it. Just that their wizard powers are amazing.
Yeah, it's just every time. I think it can't get better. Kyrie's like, well, what if we add this thing in? What if we, what if we do a threat tracker? What if we do something like that? And so every time he just continues to surprise me. But yeah, we didn't have a website until probably
that checks out
around the time that we started, and I still have to remind myself to promote that because St. Pete by Night Tabletop.com, by the way, for everyone. I have to
Yeah,
remind
yeah.
myself to promote it because I got so used to not having it for 2
Right.
years that now it's just like,
That makes
oh, right,
sense.
we have this thing. But yeah, that's new.
But yeah, and so it's definitely an experience, and like it was definitely an experience, kind of trying to find a group last minute because like, oh hey, I haven't really talked to anyone here. Because what's funny is like I didn't anticipate like joining a hunter game. Is like I had this idea for a bounty hunt game who was like the concept I had in my head that I was like, I think that'd be interesting to play is basically someone who was an immigrant lawyer in their life and kind of like understood the struggles of that,
Yeah,
and I thought that
absolutely.
would have been like an interesting concept there.
Fantastic.
But as fate would have it, I'm in a lovely hunter game that
Yeah.
I will say is slow. Actions have consequences.
They do have consequences. Damien, what was your first impressions upon joining the server? Actually, I do want to say you gave me some very, very valuable feedback early on into this process of you being a part of the community. And thankfully, it did encourage some really necessary and positive changes. But please go ahead and tell the story of your first impressions.
There's a lot of information, and one thing I found is that you couldn't just go to one place for that information. You had to go to this channel and that channel and here and there and this. And I suppose it's great if you've been on the server for a while and you know your way around, but as someone coming brand new in, there was a lot of information, a lot of different places. And I found that it's got frustrating to start with. And I think that's what fueled the message that I sent you regarding the feedback. Was it the Google Forms or something like that with all and there was probably, I don't know, half a dozen different points in there that I kind of suggested moving a few channels around. I'm also a Discord admin as well for a pretty huge channel elsewhere. So I know what it's like trying to herd cats on a server. And I wanted to make it user-friendly for me. I wanted to kind of compartmentalize everything so that I know if I'm looking for a rule, it's going to be in this section. If I want to find merchandise, it's going to be in this section. All sorts of things like that. Because there are some channels that I'm not interested in seeing. I have no interest in whatsoever. So I want to be able to mute those channels and know that that section is gone or whatever. The other thing that I found frustrating actually was the suggested channels thing, which I think I've managed to get rid of now, because it would suggest me channels that I've muted but people are using, but because people are using them, it's suggesting them to me, and it's like, well, I don't want to know about.
I don't care. I don't care what's happening on those channels. Yeah, absolutely.
So I didn't want to be suggested a channel that I've muted and hidden, but I think I fixed that now anyway. But there is a lot of information here, and I think it's much better laid out now than it was. It's the way that you've got the headers, everything is compartmentalized nicely now. I think if you're looking to find something, it's pretty easy to find it. But again, I did love the website as well. That's one of the first things I went to read up on some of the history and sort of things like that. And I found that absolutely fascinating. It was a good read, that was, especially someone who is playing a character who is also new to St. Petersburg. It was nice to have a little bit of background information going in so that I knew what to expect in character, so that I wasn't just completely blind going in with nothing. Yeah.
No, and it's a perfect example of just how valuable feedback is. Like we are not attached to anything. We are a flexible, like this has been an experiment. It's been a progress where there's been a lot of band-aids on top of band-aids, us trying to figure stuff out. I wish I had kept like a screen capture of what the first Discord server looked like at the very beginning. Complete catastrophe compared to now. And we've also had to adjust to a lot of the innovations that Discord has brought out. Like you were talking about beta chat, Nathan. When that first came out, it was chaos. Like we didn't know what to do with it. We were like, check the beta chat. And people were like, I don't even know what that is. And so we've also had to kind of grow to adjust to all those things, but your voices are heard. That's a testament to anything. Is we've got Damien, a new player to the server, had some concerns, brought them up, and that really did make a difference. It really was. I took a lot of that to heart and very much appreciated it, because we don't know what it's like to see it with new eyes. The people who are on staff have been on staff or played since day one. And they've seen us making these changes that did improve, but might have been overwhelming to people who were just coming in for the first time. So just because we don't necessarily take action on things right away, I want to confirm to everybody who's watching, everybody who plays on this server, we hear you, and we are making note of it, and we are figuring out ways to adjust and accommodate certain things. Certain things are the way they are for a reason, and that's why they stay there. But other things are very flexible. You know, other things we're willing to put out guidebooks and websites and articles and all kinds of stuff because we want it to be. It is a lot of information, undoubtedly. This is an unusual way to play Vampire the Masquerade. It's not the way it was intended. This whole World of Darkness experience is not the way they intended it to be when they released the book. So we've had to, you know, adjust and make homebrew rules and stuff like that to accommodate this kind of setting. So it can be very overwhelming, but we want to make it as easy as possible. We want to make you comfortable. So if anybody's watching and has feedback, please don't hesitate to set it in, because it means the world to us. It really does. Pat, go ahead and discuss your first impressions coming into the server and getting involved.
I'm not gonna beat the undead horse, but it was a lot to process. The mountain to climb, and I am a lore file. I will consume all World of Darkness lore, whether it's marginally possibly true or not. Conjecture, I don't care. I'll eat it all up, and I'll eat it all. So I read through just about everything I can get my hands on. And it took me a while to get that, but we've addressed that at length. Having played a lot of online chat-based World of Darkness games in the 90s, and even into the early 2000s, there were concerns I had coming to another online game. And there'd been a reason why for almost 20 years I'd stayed away from that format, is because a lot of those games, people develop as cults of personality around one or two key figures. And that causes implosion, that causes drama, it causes chaos. And so when I came here, I was very quiet and I was very observant at first, and I was watching to see if I saw any of those signs. And I really didn't see any of those signs. Of course, there's some people that talk more than others. There's some people that are more active in chat than others. That's not something that's uncommon. But I didn't really notice any particular gravitas from any person that was directing everything, other than our storytellers and our moderators, which is the way it should be. But even they are not these giant figures. They don't present themselves as these infallible creatures. You know, I play at a table with Kent, and when he says he's wrong, he admits to he's wrong. That it happens. It happens to all of us. So coming in and seeing that, I started to be a little bit more vocal, a little bit more engaging in the chat. And I met some really cool people, and like I said, I got snatched up when a game started, and there are even concepts here that I have never used in a game ever in my entire life. I submitted I wrote a wonderful backstory because everybody thinks their own backstory is amazing. Everybody loves their own.
But it is amazing. It's very well done.
I mathed out my character sheet, and I submitted it to Burnham, and he took a look at it, and he was like, "This is great. Where's your knife block?" And I'm like, "What's a knife block?" No idea. Never used it in my entire life. So he sent me a template. I'm like, wow. For a storyteller, this is useful. Okay, all right. So I mean, there's some things that I've had to learn along the way to acclimate to playing here, but overall, it's been a relatively smooth experience. Other than the absurd amount of data that you have to process to attempt to catch up. I'm still going through YouTube and Twitch and trying to watch videos just so I can know who some of these characters are and how they are, and who even plays them, because I'll know the character, but I don't know who plays that character.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that was another big motivator for us starting over, for us taking what we have and not throwing it away, not doing away with it, but really putting it to a close and saying, let's start over fresh. We've got a bunch of new people in the server and in the game. Let's try and have a more introductory approach. And that's why we broke it up into tables instead of, one massive world, and kind of gave people a much more accessible in. because one thing that we were experiencing was in the more LARP style format of, you know, everything's happening all at the same time. It could be very overwhelming. It could give a big, you know, shock to people, or make it feel like you can't get involved because, well, the pre-established people are doing all the stuff. I'm a new person. How do I, you know, it's intimidating. And so we wanted to say, like, hey, you can have your own story with your own storyteller, with your group of friends or new people, you know, might meet new friends, and you can establish these connections to come in to the greater world and not feel so alone, not feel like an island, you know, amongst all these people. And so that was a big motivator for it. But yeah, it's a lot of information. And the beauty of it, again, in the new iteration, you don't need to know any of it. You really don't. Like, realistically, unless you want to be from here, you can be someone who just arrived, who has no knowledge of anything that came before, and you can learn it the old-fashioned way of getting established and, you know, learning through playing. And that's really great. And this question, by the way, came from Krazaz, who I did not give a shout out to. He was the one who asked this specific question. But now I've got a question from Zombie Broccoli, who is a new follower to the channel. Having been an ST, how does that change your approach going in as a player now? So a lot of you have been either forever STs coming into this, or, you know, had just dabbled and tried your hand at STing. How did that kind of affect or change your perspective when coming to make a character in your games now? Nathan, we'll start with you.
First and foremost, I've had storytellers in other games for, you know, a decade and a half, and after doing it for the first time, like, I told them how sorry I was. I had no idea how much work they were putting into the product that I'd been enjoying for like a decade and a half. I've had really stable non-World of Darkness groups in other tabletop games, and they put on just so much work, and it's made me bite on hooks. It's made me not waste a single hook. That's what I would say is the biggest difference between pre Nathan Storyteller and post Nathan Storyteller is I'm actively thinking about like what is being thrown at me.
So
It might even be a little metagamey, honestly, but
you
I don't
kind of
care. We're
gain
not
an
wasting story.
You gain an understanding that nothing's put out there for no reason. So
Yeah.
if they're presenting you with a certain piece of information or a certain, you know, interaction, there's probably more to it than it might appear on the surface. And so you kind of want to jump on those things because you're like, why did they mention this particular person in the crowd? Like, why did they describe this individual? There's got to be a reason.
I
Like,
just
they're not
don't
gonna
want to
do it just
waste
for fun.
any
Yeah.
story. I
Yeah.
just don't want to waste any of it. Like
Absolutely.
it all took time, it all took work, and like we could make it cool together. Like even
100%.
if maybe I don't think so in the beginning, like it will become cool.
Very cool. Olive, how has it affected your coming into being a player now that you've had some storyteller experience?
So I will say is definitely it gives you a unique appreciation for the work and that goes into running a game, and just being like being on a side and like running a game as well is like often like as players I think we often like don't realize just how much time and effort goes into like preparing for a session, like running a long-term game. And I think being able to like appreciate that and kind of like sit with that and be like, okay, like this is a deep world, and like have that understanding that like a lot of work went into it, you know. And I think also it gives you like a unique perspective as well, and kind of because like, I also just like watch a lot of advice for running games and players. And one thing is like that I take to my heart, like in both storytelling and playing uh, is is just so much. It's I'm blanking. Sorry.
That's okay.
It's do the stupid thing and justify it later.
Interesting.
And,
Okay.
yeah, and I mean to elaborate on that is it's very much a sometimes like especially like like as a storyteller, like you can sometimes like kind of get stuck in your own head a little bit, and kind of like okay, like it has to things have to like play out a certain way or whatever, and I'm kind of seeing that from the flip side and being able to be like, okay, let's just kind of see where this goes, and find a justification for it later, because sometimes like it's in those moments you find the best stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've found that storytellers and dungeon masters, whenever I run a game for them, they're going to be some of the biggest chaos goblins in the group. Like, they're going to be the ones to just do all the things they can't do as a storyteller. All those things that they really push the boundaries, and I'm guilty of it myself. Like, I'm a Malkavian main, as you can tell, and I am all about really pushing the boundaries and asking the very unusual questions, because sometimes those are the questions I wish were asked of me when I was running stories. Like, I think about these unusual concepts, but they never come into play because the players aren't asking the questions or trying the things or
Yeah.
pulling the kind of rogue moves that could lead to that kind of information. And so I think as a player, once you actually get that opportunity, you're going to push the button. If there's a button on the wall, you're going to push the button, because just like Nathan was saying, they put that button there for a reason. If that button's there, you need to know what it does, because it does something. And so yeah, you really do push the boundaries on that. Yeah,
I can definitely like pushing buttons. Just to ask Cole about how our last session went.
absolutely. So, Damien, same question. Now, you have a very interesting perspective because you were running the game upon its iteration, upon its creation. But, like, as a general concept, coming to it with the eyes of a storyteller or a dungeon master or anything like that, how does that affect the way you enter into a game as a player?
Like Pat, I'm a huge lore hound. I've run games that have covered the whole Tremere Sorlop thing, going through to the Convention of Thorns, like everything.
Wow.
I've run all of those. And one thing I've learned over all of the years is when you want to create a character, you want to create a character that is flawed, not perfect. You want to actually give the storyteller reasons and ways to tool you over, because it's more interesting. 100%. If your character can see and do everything and they're a jack of all trades and they're perfect, it's kind of boring. You want to be able to fail, because failure can be spectacular when it's handled in the right way. And so I've learned that I can't metagame because I have a lot of knowledge of the world, and I know I can create a character that has a backstory that goes back millennia and would fit canon perfectly. But it also means that I can create a character that is outside of that box because I know what the box is. So I can create something a bit different and a bit weird. And that's how I kind of push the boundaries. I'm always a very respectful player because I put a lot of work into my game. So I'm not the guy who pushes the button. I'm not the guy who creates the Chaos Goblin. I'm the opposite. I'm the one who is very respectful because I know what it's like to storytell a game like this. All of my games are political. And political games require an awful lot more work than just a dungeon crawl. Let's face it. If this was just a combat game, you would need like 14 encounters and a big finish, and that would be it. But you've got to have story, and you've got to have sub-story, and then subplot, and then subtext under with all of that, and then reasons, right? And it's like a spider web, and it just goes out and out and out and out and out. And you can bring that whole knowledge into creating character by giving yourself flaws that you know are a brilliant hook for the storyteller just to fish you on. And so that's the biggest thing that I've found is, especially in a game that deals with ennui like this, create a flawed character.
Well, and that's one of the beautiful things about the World of Darkness setting, to be completely honest. The World of Darkness system is, I have never seen another game, and it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I have a limited scope. But I had never seen a game when I came into the World of Darkness that encouraged making broken characters. Like broken, flawed, harmful characters. The older editions of World of Darkness games, for those who aren't experienced, had pages and pages of flaws, to the point that sometimes the flaws outweighed the merits in a lot of the
Oh wow.
sources, where there were more problematic things than there were positives. And that was the beauty of it. Like in Dungeons and Dragons, you're supposed to be the best version of whatever it is. You're supposed to save the
Right.
world. You're supposed to be the hero. And unless you play in a very, very full game, a very, very rich and thick game with an experienced dungeon master who wants you to make more flawed characters, you're going to make the big chinned hero or the dashing rapscallion or whatever. It's not going to be as encouraged to make those kind of multi-dimensional characters. But World of Darkness not only encourages it, they require it. It's part of the character creation process. You are, at minimum, supposed to take 2 points of flaws in 5th edition. At minimum. So they are telling you, you have to be a flawed individual to play this game. You can't be perfect. Or if you are perfect, trust me, it's only in your mind that you're perfect. You are not actually perfect.
And I agree
Right.
with you. I wish they brought more of the flaws from previous editions into
Oh,
this
me
one,
too.
because there were some fantastic flaws.
Me too,
Like
100%.
just really meaty flaws, and they just got rid of them.
Yeah. No, I don't
Yeah.
understand that. I don't know if it was a streamlining thing or what that they did, but
Maybe.
yeah, it was
I
a bad choice. Go ahead, Olive. I'm sorry.
then I was wanting to touch on something you were talking about earlier, and about like failing, and so one of the like one of the probably like the most profound pieces of advice I've come with when it comes to to playing games is it's called failing forward, because sometimes it's you can know it's like something is going to like have a bad outcome, but it's sometimes like failing is more interesting, and it very much is like when you are always succeeding at what you're doing at a certain point it becomes okay, like it becomes trivial, and it's one of those things where it's like, okay, like I'm just going to keep succeeding, what's the point, but like being able to like accept failure and even like take that failure and turn it into like a wonderful story,
Well, there's
it's
nothing to overcome if you win. There's
yeah,
nothing
exactly. And so
to there's no way to overcome the odds, to beat whatever the opposition is if you're just constantly winning. And that's why I don't
yeah,
understand cheating in World of Darkness.
right,
People who get 10, 12 successes every roll, like that, you are missing out. You are just
right.
straight up missing out if you are winning at everything. Because you're
Mhm.
right, failure spawns opportunity and inspiration and odds. Without odds, what's the point? Like
Yeah,
if you are the best at everything, that's boring. That's just boring.
it
And so
is.
yeah, I completely agree with you. Pat, let's talk about your kind of experiences now that you're coming into a game as a player after having been a storyteller. What did that kind of bring into you?
Just to mimic off what Damien said about I'm going to speak in generalizations here. I don't think that there's very many people that stay in World of Darkness that don't want to be challenged. There's a lot of people that come to World of Darkness from playing the math click clack dice game. And I do too. I love it. I love my Pathfinder D&D power fantasies. I absolutely love them. They're so much fun. But when I want to get deep into a character, or when I'm teaching new people how to play World of Darkness, I don't let them have dice right away. Like you're going to have to figure these things out by talking, and you're going to have to figure these things out by moving through them. Like I said, I cut my teeth on Changeling, and that is a game where you are born to fail, no matter what. You are staring down the end, and it tells you that from the very beginning. It does not make any misconceptions about it. You are going to not be what you are one day, and you're going to forget everything magical that exists in this world, and you're going to be normal, and that's your fate. So now go deal with that. And World of Darkness, for me, and especially because I've brought a ton of new players in, um, I've had some that genuinely loved it, and I've had some that had to kind of find their particular flavor of it. Some love vampire, some love mage, some love werewolf, but overall, those themes exist across all those genres of challenge. There
Mm-hmm.
has to be challenge. If there's not challenge, it's like we said, it's boring. There's nothing interesting going on there.
Well, and that's what the dice are supposed to do for you, is supposed to add that randomity, that element of like, who knows what's going to happen. And I think 5th edition does a wonderful job with the messy criticals, bestial failures, desperation dice. You know, all of the systems have that chaotic unknown element that they add in, that is supposed to encourage like massive success or devastating failure. And
Yeah.
I love that it does that. But that's why we have dice. If it was just about describing things, of course you're going to describe yourself kicking ass and taking names. It's better to have something that says, well, maybe you don't. Even if it's the thing you're the best at, there is a odds, however low it may be, there is an odds of failure.
Yeah, and with whether it's the blood system or the rage system or the threat system in Hunter, there is always going to be something looming over your head, whether you're rolling dice or not. You know, man, if I roll these dice, I have real high hunger right now, or do I want to risk this because I don't have a lot of rage right now, or do we even want to do this because everybody in the universe is watching us on closed circuit television right now? We don't want to do this.
Right.
So there's always a threat looming, and that just makes things more interesting to me.
Well, and this is a great transitioning point to what I want to talk about next, which is the World of Darkness system. You know, what are your favorite parts? What do you think could change? What do you think that, you know, is best about the older editions for those of you who are experienced with the older editions versus the new? But we're going to get to that in just a second. I want to talk about briefly our dice giveaway that we're doing tonight. We have multiple amazing vendors who sponsor St. Pete by Night in a variety of ways, offering their services. And so we are doing a dice giveaway tonight on this very stream. If you use the hashtag DiceMePLZ, Dice Me Please, in the chat, you will be entered to win a set of dice that we will give away at the end of the stream. So if you haven't done it yet, or if you want to save it till the very end, use hashtag DiceMePlease in the Twitch chat to be entered into that drawing for a set of dice. But let's talk about World of Darkness. Let's get into it. The system itself. Let's talk about the system, the lore, the settings versus other games. So versus your D&D, versus your, you know, Call of Cthulhu. What is it that really drew you specifically to the World of Darkness? What about Vampire the Masquerade versus, you know, other games of horror like a Call of Cthulhu or a Monster of the Week? You know, what was it about World of Darkness that called to you? Nathan, we'll start with you.
Just so the first time I fell in love with the World of Darkness is definitely Bloodlines the game, and it is the way that game and that storytelling is able to dance back and forth between hilarious comedy and awful horror and tragedy. The juxtaposition of the horror of the World of Darkness, like in Vampire or Werewolf or those systems, and our absolutely ridiculous modern world.
Mm-hmm.
Those two things colliding and being two sides of the same coin is storytelling magic.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And as a storyteller, like like having, like, if you've lived in a city or a metroplex for a long time, World of Darkness gives you the easiest in to storytelling you're ever going to get. Because if you've lived in a metroplex for a long time, you can think, oh, where is that? And the first kernel happens, right? Like you have this first little nugget of information that you can spin up and put things on top of it. Like how would the, you know, kindred that are there use this area?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
just-
I mean, what world do we know better than the world we live in? You know,
Right.
what world are we going to know the intricate ins and outs of than the world we live in? And that's not to say that World of Darkness doesn't leave room for imagination. It very much does. Like, you do have to kind of put on, you know, your creative hat, so to speak, to play, because you have to not just look at the world we live in, you have to imagine that there's a world beneath the world we live in, that there's another layer that it goes. And I'm sure we've all thought about, like, you know, secret organizations, Skull and Bones, or that kind of thing. This takes that and kind of puts some context to it and puts some more depth to that idea of secret societies and kind of how would they exist in our world. And I'm 100% with you. Like I was in San Antonio just a month ago, and while I was walking I was like, that's where the Thin Bloods are brewing right now. That's where they are, right there. There's that broken down warehouse. That's where they're at. And you really do start to see the world through a completely different lens. Like you do think about that. When I moved to St. Petersburg, which is where I live, which is why the game is based here, I thought this is a Toreador town. It is. They've got art. They've got culture downtown. Like I could tell that the setting shaped itself from my experience in the World of Darkness. And so I was able to say, this is the perfect setting for a vampire game. This is where everything is and who owns what and who's controlling what. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. Whereas like with D&D or other games where it's in these fictional settings, yes, that can be fun, you know, if you have the brain for it, if you have the ability to think, okay, I'm in a dungeon fighting orcs, I'm picturing all this, but it's gonna be slightly skewed from what each individual person is thinking. Whereas here, you could do Google Street View and find what building you're raiding at this particular moment. You can all have the same picture. Everybody knows what a highway looks like. Everybody knows what cars look like. Like everybody knows all of these things. There's not a lot of required imagination, and I think that makes it all the more immersive. The fact that you know what it's like to be standing at a gas station pumping gas, and what if, you know, a jeep full of hunters rolled up and you're a kindred sitting there pumping gas. You could probably put yourself in that mindset versus, okay, I'm standing on the Palisades at a medieval town about to be attacked by a horde of orcs. Like that requires some imagination, or just picturing a Lord of the Rings movie in order to really get into that headspace. So I completely agree with that.
And you can like in that session where the players turn everything upside down, go to a completely different place in the city, and do something else. You can just be like, you can just come up with something.
Yep.
Because you knew you had some idea of what was going to be there. You know what's there in real life. You know what kindred are there. And the whole process can just get jump started at the turn of a dime, right?
Yep. 100%. Olive, what called to you about the World of Darkness? What really appealed to you about the setting or the system, or, you know, any element of it?
So one thing for me is I very much I've played my fair share of other TTRPGs, but my start was D&D. Thing about like D&D is it's kind of rigid when you actually look at it, and kind of, but it's a power game. And I realized, like, after playing D&D for so long, is like that's not necessarily like the kind of game I want to play. And like I've branched into a few different systems, and like I like different systems for different things. But the World of Darkness as a whole was the first one to really capture that spark of like when I first got into D&D. And I think for me, like what it was is, and like as you put it, is like it is a world like ours, so it's easy to like envision yourself in. And I think there's also like so much like lore to it, but like it doesn't necessarily feel overbearing, and like, you don't necessarily need to know all the lore. And I think it manages to blend that in naturally, and it really influences the mechanics as well. And it's not a super crunchy system by any means. Like that was a huge thing for me, because like I don't necessarily like super crunchy systems.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean they serve their purpose, you know, but it's one of those things where like at the end of the day, it's like I like simple systems where the mechanics don't necessarily get in the way of telling a story.
Right.
And I think World of Darkness does that really well. And like everything is fairly simple, and there's not a whole lot of things you need to keep track of necessarily in terms of mechanics. Everything you're keeping track of is going to be more so like story wise. And for me, like I found it was a really easy system to get into, to start running, and I felt very comfortable running a game.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, I can definitely like see like envision this, and it's like, okay, like whereas like running other games, you have to kind of like have a different this mindset as you explained it. Whereas this is okay, it's basically like the world we live in, And like essentially, like for the game I run is like it's an Anarch game in Vegas. Which the one thing immediately I chose Vegas because Vegas is such an iconic city, and it's one of those things everyone knows about Vegas. And the one thing I immediately went to with is, okay, this is an Anarch game, but this city is run by the Tord. They own this city. And
Sure.
it was fun to kind of build that and kind of like have that basis and be like, okay, I'm not just starting from scratch, you know.
Well, and I think you can pick up and play the World of Darkness a lot easier than you can other games, because you can just be like, okay, you are, and I'm sure everybody's run this game in some iteration or another, but you're yourself. You are playing yourself right now, and this thing happens. You know the town. You know, if you're with your friends who are all local, you know the town, you know the ins and outs. You can just pick up and play a World of Darkness Chronicle, whereas I feel like with a D&D Chronicle or something like that, you really have to put in a lot of thought into like the world layout. Unless you know a setting like Eberron or Forgotten Realms or something really, really well, you really have to do a lot more research. Whereas with World of Darkness, you can just kind of pick up and go. And I agree with you about it not being crunchy. That's what appealed to me about it, was the fact that it was called a storytelling system, which was kind of a new concept of like, oh, the influence is the story. It's not about the dungeon. It's not about the encounters. It's not about the mechanics. It's about the story, and all these mechanics that they do implement are simply to help support the telling of that story. So I think that's very, very, very valid. Damien, how about you? What really called to you about the World of Darkness, especially since it was not even a thing when you first discovered it? It didn't have the popularity of the 90s or 30 years to back it.
So, I mean, I started off with basic red box D&D, and I went through various different iterations of that up until AD&D, first and second edition AD&D, predominantly first edition. Now, first edition AD&D was crunchy. It's a horrible system. You know, you roll dice high, but you have the armor class low, and you with THACO and all that sort of rubbish. So it was a really crunchy system. And on top of that, it was in a fantasy world. So you had to have the crunch of the system as well as remembering you're in a different world, which made it a lot more complicated. So what appealed to me was the fact that this was set in our world. It wasn't like, whereas Cthulhu is set in our world as well, it's set, you know, 1920s or 89 if you do Play by Gaslight. There was a Cthulhu Now version, but it was kind of watered down and not very good, and so on. I also came from the West End Games Star Wars D6 system, Shadowrun D6 system as well, when you just use all of these dice. And the World of Darkness was just using D10s instead of D6s. And so I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And what really appealed to me when it started to take off was all of the systems use that same dice. Even Exalted, which is, I love Exalted. Exalted is one of my favorite systems. And but it's all the same. So Mage uses the same system, Werewolf uses the same system. It's all D10s. And it made it really easy. You don't have to learn a new dice system, but you can play a new game. Yes, I know there are things like GURPS and so on and so forth, but you know, GURPS is a shell that you like, a system that you put a shell on. Whereas this was a world. I used to get friends when they would go away to other countries to bring back maps, physical maps of the cities they were in, because this internet didn't exist back then. You know, home computers didn't exist back then. You know, everything was on paper.
Right.
So I would have a physical map, and that is what I would use if I needed to base something in that world, in that city, because it's real. You know what a gas station looks like, so you can visualize that. If I can say this is a street in Germany, you've got a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like if I can describe it, whereas it's a lot harder to do that in D&D or something like that.
100%.
So it made it easier to tell stories. I ran a 4-year campaign in World of Darkness that didn't use dice. No dice whatsoever. None. Not one dice was rolled in that entire game. It was a collaborative story between me and the players. That's all it was. And they screwed up, but everything was done consensually. So I didn't foist stuff on them. They agreed when they would screw up and when they wouldn't, you know, not by committee, but it was all just done because we wanted to tell a story, not roll dice and see what the outcome was. And I run an entire campaign for 4 years just without dice because it's a story. And that's what drew me to it, telling stories. I've always been a storyteller.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think that's 100% true. And I think that now more than ever is a great time to get into the world of darkness, because you don't have to live in the city that the game takes place in to have a street view of it, to have pages on pages on pages of information about the city. Like when it was on paper, yeah, like unless you went to the library and like looked up books, if you were playing a game in Saskatchewan, like you probably had a pretty limited knowledge about Saskatchewan. But now you could theoretically become an expert with just a few good Google searches. Like you could learn so much about it. And that is the beauty of playing in the world, in a world we live in the world of darkness, in the real world, because there's so much information. There's just so much, and it's at your fingertips now more than ever. And you might learn something that you can take with you into your real life. Like me knowing the AC of orcs isn't going to help me when I go out into the real world, but me traveling to a city that I played a game in, I'll know places I want to check out because of the game as my context. Like, oh, we went to this bar that really exists. I have to see it for myself now. I have to. Like it's yeah, go ahead.
Point in case is like one of my original vampire campaign revolved around the Knights Templar. So I became an expert on the Knights Templar. And I ended up going to Carcassonne and Rennes-le-Château in the south of France, and all those sort of areas, and taking actual photographs and learning about all of that. And but the good thing about it is, and I got to touch on something that Nathan said, which is 100% correct, in as much as if you know the world, you can wing it a lot easier than anything else. If the players throw you a curveball, which let's face it, there's an old idiom, the plot never survives contact with the players, you can just throw something in. They never know that you're winging it because you know the world, because you're living in it.
Yep, 100%. 100%. So we'll see if Pat's able to reconnect. But let's go to the opposite side of the coin. What is something that has been maybe a challenge for you in terms of the world of darkness? Something that you've had to either, you've struggled with learning, or something that took a great deal of effort to kind of adjust to in order to kind of get into the game. And we just got Pat back, so I'm going to let him answer the first question before we get back to it. There we go. Okay. So, Pat, what is something that you like about the world of darkness, or what called to you about the world of darkness? And then we'll get into what is kind of been a little more difficult or struggling with.
I'm glad I made it back because I really, really wanted to talk about this part.
I'm excited to hear it.
Yes. So for me, I gathered a lot of World of Darkness books very quickly, but I didn't have anybody to play with because nobody around me where I lived in Texas really did anything with role-playing games. I had to slowly integrate people into it as I learned about it, or later on, several years later, I had to find people that I could actually play with in person. So, I collected werewolf, I collected vampire, I collected wraith, I collected changeling, but it was the first time I laid my hands on Shoals, which was the first Black Dog book for wraith, that I learned that World of Darkness had teeth, and they were not afraid to have teeth. They were not afraid to address hard issues, difficult things, and pay them respect at the same time to integrate them into their world, so that you could acknowledge these events that happened, but you could also give them a context and the overall story of the World of Darkness. So when I learned that, I rapidly caught up with what World of Darkness to me actually was. It was this imperfect world, as I like to call it. It's the Bondo world. You have this thing that looks nice, but it's not held together by the things you think it's held together by. Mm-hmm. And it's this eye-opening experience for a normal character to live its normal life in a world that may not be as good as ours, but they suddenly become aware of an even worse situation that's going on, and how do you deal with it? It is
100%.
that personal horror. That was always the term that really resounded with me, was personal horror. Um, not just group, not just things jumping out of the dark, but now you know, how are you going to deal with it?
One some of the most terrifying stories within the world of darkness are the ones that aren't the monsters. It's the monsters in normal people. It's the monsters in society. It's the monsters. I mean, World of Darkness, there's no holds barred in World of Darkness. Like, you can look through the history, there's no subject that they don't touch on, which has caused it to be somewhat problematic in some people's views, going back to some of the older material with fresh eyes, with this new, you know, this new era of understanding and stuff. You can look back and say like, oh, maybe
Right.
that was a little iffy at the time, but they were not afraid to talk about the things that others are afraid to talk about, that others like refuse to acknowledge, or they veil with a fantasy flavor to make it obviously not racist or sexist or whatever.
Right.
Hmm.
World of Darkness tackled those things head on. I mean, in the books, in every single book, they say this is a mature system. We are going to be talking about the dark and dirty and awful things of the world. You do not need to use them, but we are going to reference them. We are going to mention them. And I do appreciate that they are talking about considerate play a lot more in the more modern
Yeah.
books, and saying like, hey,
Yeah, that's
these things
important.
could be offensive, so just tread lightly. But they're still talking about them. They are still addressing them. And
Oh,
I
for
think
sure.
that puts a very real lens on the world. I mean, and that's why some people can struggle in the World of Darkness too, is because it is so close to reality. It does touch on the dark and gritty things in the world that people don't want to talk about. Whereas a lot of a lot of people come to gaming for escapism. They don't want to talk about the financial crisis. They don't want to talk about war in the Middle East. But this game is like, yeah, those things are still happening. And we try in a very considerate way in St. Pete to still keep that element. I mean, I've told everyone since the first iteration, since our first batch of characters, hey, racism still exists. We're not going to highlight it. We're not going to glorify it. Like, you're in the dirty South. You're in Florida. Like, you're going to be alluded to certain things that might be uncomfortable, but I think it's a disservice to the world, to the setting, to just ignore those things. And so I agree with you. Like, they did talk about World War II and have how it was incorporated into the World of Darkness. They did talk about, the war in the Middle East and the financial crises incorporated into the World of Darkness. Like, it was very, very real. And I think that's what made it easy to kind of understand and attach to, is because these are talking about real world events from our world in their world, and how it
Hmm.
impacted their world, or how their world
I,
impacted it.
and I
Um,
remember when the New
Yeah.
York by Night book, the second edition of it was published, there was an entire forward page involving 9/11,
yep.
and how they acknowledge, but they were not going to set this book in a setting that involved that event. Like,
Hmm.
they were always so transparent and so crystal clear on their stances. Um, and it just made it easier to work with that source material.
And again, I
Hmm.
like they made mistakes. World of Darkness made its fair share of mistakes, and to anybody who is new
Yeah.
to the World of Darkness and is starting to deep dive into those things, a couple of points I want to
Yeah.
make. It is inappropriate in today's context, in today's lens. Keep in mind that these things were written 20 years ago. Some of these things were written 30 years ago in a very different society, in a very different world. I don't think I truly believe, which is why I stay involved with the system and with the setting and the company and everything, they never intended to offend people, to disrespect people. That was never the motivation behind it. They just weren't as informed, or they weren't as, up to date. They didn't have the kind of cultural awareness and stuff we have now. And I think that they
Hmm.
have corrected the ship as they've gone, as they've learned, as we all have, as any of us who just hit 40, myself, we've had to like make adjustments and accommodations and learn new ways of behavior and things. But be careful, If you are new to the
Oh, for
game,
sure.
be careful. When you start looking into older books, when you check out PDFs from 1997 or whatever, you're going to see some things that at first might turn you off from the game. But let me assure you that it's not their intention or motivation for that to have been the case. It was just a different world. It's like going back and watching a movie from the 40s and wondering why, certain things are happening. It was a different
Right.
world. They were using the lens of the time. But since we're talking about the mistakes of the World of Darkness and some of the dirtier kind of mishaps, let's go back to the question of what was some of the biggest challenges for you, or some things that you've had to kind of adjust in order to indulge in and participate in the World of Darkness. Nathan, let's start with you.
I'll say something a little bit more lighthearted because I actually don't have a whole lot of complaints other than this one. In V5, for some reason, Thin Bloods are better at blood magic than Tremere, and that hurts me to this day. I don't want to live in this world. It hurts me.
So I will say, I do think
That's wild.
I do think that Tremere are overrated. In general, I will be that guy. I will be that guy. I know I will be that guy. But I think they got dealt a bad hand in V5. Like with
A little bit.
they got a lot. They got too much in the older editions.
Yeah.
They were overpowered in the
Yes.
older editions because they kept adding
Yeah.
paths and abilities and all this shit. But they got
I know
a
how we
really-
got here.
They got a really bad
Yeah.
hand.
And then
in
they're
V5.
like, you know what? Just for that here's the here's the
They got
follow
dealt a
me on.
really bad hand in V5, and I think
just-
they
yeah.
tried to make up with it with the Blood Sigils book, but I think they fell short. I think that they
Yeah.
still needed more for the Tremere than they have, because the Tremere were the magic, and Thin Bloods definitely were a big focus of 5th edition, I think, because they're trying to veer
Yeah.
away from the old vampires. They're trying to veer
Yeah.
away from the elders.
Mhm.
The mechanics don't even let you start above 10th generation. Like they
And I
don't.
like-
Yeah.
I like the focus on young vampires. I
Yes.
love that.
Me too. That is one
Love
thing
that.
Like, I do like.
But yeah,
Because I feel like there's a lot less power creep that way.
they do really put a lot on the Thin Bloods. The Thin Bloods, I mean, I've played a Thin Blood, I'm playing a Thin Blood in a recent Chronicle, and just playing it, I was like, this is so broken. Like, I am whooping people's ass that should be able to beat me inherently, but because of all the creative solutions they gave Thin Bloods, because of all the different formulae and the ability to adapt disciplines, whatever discipline you're looking for at any given time, like it is crunchy to play a Thin Blood, and they have a lot of advantages that Tremere do not. So I will agree with that.
I had Tremere villains in my campaign, and I had to convert Mind's Eye Theater to make them even be villains.
Yeah.
To 5th edition. I just couldn't. I couldn't be a villain with the tools I was given.
No, absolutely. Olive, what have you kind of been adjusting to, or what did you find when you first got into the World of Darkness was like a kind of a head spin for you in terms of
I think-
a D&D background?
I think for me at least, coming from D&D, like D&D very much is, well, it's may not necessarily be a game you can just pick up and play as easily as a World of Darkness game. I think in terms of character creation, the one thing I found to be a challenge is how Vampire tends to be very front heavy, and so in terms of like learning the system, it can be a bit daunting because there's a lot of stuff you don't necessarily understand, and it's like and especially like how like Vampire, especially the book is not the most well organized. And so it's like okay, having to constantly flip back and forth just and like I remember it's like my first character took me like 3-4 hours to make, because I was trying to unwrap my head around like all my options and kind of understand what I was doing, and I was also like doing it by myself, and so I had to kind of teach myself how to do that. And so like I got there, but like once you get past like that initial hurdle, it's one of those things where okay, and like a lot of like the work has been done, and so like you can kind of sit back and kind of coast into that, and it's one of those things with like you really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that the benefit to coming from like an AD&D background versus a a D20 third edition 3.5, that kind of is that we were used to using a variety of dice to do stuff. Like we were used to like, okay, this uses a D4, this uses like, whereas in the modern editions it's like D20 plus whatever. And so to roll skills in Vampire, it's like, okay, the dots equal the dice, and then you got to consider all successes versus not successes. That is
Yeah.
kind of a hurdle. And yeah, the character, like the layout of the books is atrocious. It's just atrocious. And I'd love to say that's new. It's not. It's always been an issue that World of Darkness struggles in writing a good core book, a good rule book, because there
Yeah.
are so many factors to consider, and that can be very jarring, very, very jarring for new players, to say the very least. Damien, same question. What was kind of, and again, you started in the earlier days when it was a little bit more simplified, I think. I'm sure in the first releases, they didn't have all these disciplines and abilities, and there weren't as many options. But what was a kind of a hurdle for you to overcome?
There are a few system problems, and it's been fairly obvious that they've tried to rectify them down throughout editions, and it's like a pendulum. They either go too far one way or too far the other way. Case in point, celerity. Celerity changes down throughout all of the editions. Oh my God, what were they thinking? From like extra actions to adding to dice pools to doing this to doing that. It's like I can't remember which version of celerity goes with which edition anymore. There are so many different ones. The other thing that I really didn't like was they suddenly decided to create all these different bloodlines, tons of them, tons and tons and tons of different bloodlines that really were like so niche. They were so niche that they rarely got played. And I think they could have been incorporated into other clans. And I think they could have done a lot more with that. I don't know what they were playing at. They were trying to be all things to all people. And then the other thing I love the concept of, but I don't know any ST who has ever allowed a player to play this, and that is True Bruja. Temporis. Right?
Yep.
Fantastic. I would love to play one. I would never let a player play one.
Hand in general. Just the true hand in general.
Never.
What even is that?
Never, ever. And I've had players ask, like, do you think they're going to release Temporis? And I always say, I hope not. If they do, we've gone too far. Not because it isn't an amazing, amazing concept, but it takes a very specific kind of player to pull it off effectively without it getting absurd. And that is a percentage, like a 1% of players could play a True Bruja appropriately. And in what you said about Bloodlines, I completely agree, because here's the crazy thing. That's the most often asked question of the staff here is like, can I play a Daughter of Cacophony? Can I play a Samedi? Can I play a, like, we get the Bloodlines question more than I think we get any other question about the system other than can I play a Tzimisce, which apparently everyone's big on. But it's
really?
Yeah, it's a crazy thing, and you could tell when people come in how much experience they have if they ask a Bloodline question. Like, you could tell, oh, okay, you played 3rd edition, or you played Revised. Like, you had the splats of the different clan books to be asking me about Bloodlines. But yeah, I think that World of Darkness ran into a trying to do everything instead of a we do these things really well and we're fine with that. Like, you can't customize your character. It's like multi-classing in my mind. Like, when they introduced multi-classing into D&D, it was like, no, like, pick a class and stick with it. You chose this, do this. You don't need to be a fighter, warlock, rogue, mage. Like, you don't need to be that.
Allow yourself to have weaknesses.
Right, allow yourself to be. That's what makes balanced parties, is having your fighter, your rogue, your wizard, and your cleric. Like, if you can do everything, you don't need anybody else. And these are supposed to be collaborative games. You're supposed to be doing teamwork. and instituting that you're better at something than I am. I can't do the thing you can do. And I think you're right that World of Darkness tried to, like, if somebody had a good idea, they put it into canon. They made a bloodline for it. They made a whatever. And I'm nervous because I can see them still doing it a little bit. Like, if you read the Cult of the Blood Gods book, they have the bloodlines. It's in one little paragraph, but they have the bloodlines in there. They released the Daughters of Cacophony lore sheet. Like, they are clearly not running from the concept of instituting bloodlines again at some point, if not already. So it's there. It's still there.
The idea of a lore sheet bloodline as like a template over another character is okay, because you're still a member of that other character, but you've got like this template over the top. Fine. But a completely separate, different bloodline, just no.
No, it's absolutely absurd.
Yeah, it's like I recently read through Cult of the Blood Gods because I'm getting ready to play a Hekata character, and oh my god.
Yep, it's in there. Like, it's in there. It's just one paragraph that they clearly snuck in where they're like, hey, if you're going to play a Harbinger of Skulls, here's how you adjust your disciplines. Like, they sneak it in there. And I appreciate the fact that they're still trying to stay true to the old lore. I do. I appreciate that they're not trying to just restart. Like, Werewolf straight up said, we're restarting. Yep. We're not bringing anything from the old canon in. We will reference some stuff, and they do. They reference the Stargazers. They reference, all of this stuff. But they said, we're starting over. And I respect them for that. I respect them because 5th edition is all about introducing a new generation of people to the World of Darkness. Don't make it overwhelming. But I do see vampires still slipping in the little... They brought back Coldonic Sorcery. Like, Coldonic Sorcery is in Blood Sigils. They clearly don't still want to say no to people. They still want you to be... And they want you to be able to do everything. Based off of the way that now any clan can start with Blood Sorcery if they take the right Predator type. We don't allow it in St. Pete, but technically, according to rules as written... Anybody could start with Blood Sorcery, and that's messed up. Anybody could start with Cultinism, and that's messed up.
The new way the disciplines are worked out means that you can actually use different levels of disciplines to mimic other disciplines. So you could create another level 1 obfuscate that does something else, or so I like that. I like what they've done with the disciplines for 5th edition, but that's actually a holdover from the level 6 to 10 disciplines in previous editions, but they've just brought it down to level 1 to 5. So that's great.
Wow. Wait. Okay, so what? I must have missed that though. It's like, wait, anyone can start with Blood Sorcery? What?
Yeah, by rules as written, and there have been some clarifications in errata, but if you're not paying attention to that kind of stuff, anybody could start with Blood Sorcery. Anybody could start with Oblivion. Anybody could start with these things that were clan-specific before. Now they've kind of opened it up that at character creation, you could take a Predator type that gives you something that is completely antithetical to your clan. Like, that makes sense. I mean, but
I could, I've seen it done with Caitiff, and that gets interesting, and because especially if you don't know what you're doing, that can get stupid real fast.
And this also adds to why we have so much to learn when you join our server, is because we are still very much in the mindset of Oblivion is for Lasombra and Hekata. Like, you don't just start with it. It doesn't make sense. And if you want it to make sense, you better put one hell of an argument into why you have this and why you can do this.
That's part of the story that you want to tell in the game. Right. I think that was the thing I told to one of my players, is that you want this cool weird thing, that's part of the story.
Yeah, 100%.
I'll get you there, but I'm not. We're not parachuting this character into the world like that.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's more better to earn in game through the story than to just start because you bought the right Predator type, because you started with the right dots spent in whatever. And I think that Yeah, I think that's just what made the game again. Like I'm not a huge multi-classer when I play D&D. I
Right.
do not I believe you go all the way up the chain. You chose to be a fighter, you're going to be a fighter. You're
Mhm.
going to you're going to do it or else you're never going to be great at anything. You're going to be kind of good at a lot of things.
To touch on the chat really quick. Oblivion is really one of my favorite disciplines, but it does make me cry because it's like, oh, it's like the only discipline where it's like, oh, you crit, have a Bane.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. But yeah, let's go to Pat now. Pat, what is kind of some of the stuff that's been an adjustment since entering the world of darkness?
I'm gonna get on my soapbox, and because it's a big soapbox, and I've got a couple of little things here. One, I am a comment section fighter and a die on that hill defender of W5. I know there are a lot of previous W5 players who are exceptionally upset at certain things that have happened in that system. Bye. That's my response to that. I think the disconnection of the ethno-tribal philosophy and the that whole part of Werewolf is probably one of the most wonderful things that they did to that system. And instead of pushing us into an era where we're trying to fight the end of the world, now putting us in an era where we're just trying to survive through this horrible time that may or may not be the end of the world. We don't know that yet. I love that, and I will always love that.
Yeah.
So I will defend W5 until my dying breath. It's my new favorite system. And my second soapbox also will die on this hill, Mage. So when I got into everything and I picked up my first Mage book, there's just the core book, and I read through it. I understood it. And because I understood it, I was like, nope, this one's going back on the shelf. There's just there's too much with Mage that doesn't
I was
to
about
me jive well with the other systems, because every person that is a Mage stan thinks that everything in Mage is correct when they don't understand that Mage is it's a book of perspective.
Yeah.
The whole point of Mage is perspective. Is your perspective right, or is it not? So one of the hardest things that I had to move through was I had a lot of players that picked up those books and they were instantaneously in love with Mage, and I was not happy about that. So having to rein in those Mage players, and a lot of people are talking about the return of M5, and I hope it comes back. I do, but I will tell you, it is not going to come back the way that they think it's going to come
It's
back.
not.
Oh, I
No.
100%.
It can't.
It
It's
has
impossible
to
for it to
change.
exist in that way.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not
no,
going to
it
come
has
back.
to change. I've gotten into some interesting conversations about Mage alone, and it's just like, oh boy.
No, it's
Yeah.
I love the way 5th edition has been rolled out for World of Darkness. I love the
Yes.
way that they have gone through it. I love the release schedule that they've gone through so far of, Vampire, then Hunter, which is an odd choice because Hunter was not as popular as
Definitely an odd
Werewolf
choice.
or Mage or anything like that. I love the way they've been doing this rollout, and I think that if you pay enough attention to the books, they are slowly introducing elements that come into later systems. So with Vampire, that set the standard. And I was a Vampire ride or die. I did not like Werewolf. I did not like Mage. I did not like any of the other
Right.
systems in the older iterations. But I am loving Werewolf in 5th edition. I am loving Hunter in 5th edition. And I'm actually interested in Mage for 5th edition. If they stick to the pattern they've been using,
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
excited for Mage. Changeling, I wouldn't go near with a 10-foot pole in old editions because I was like, what is this?
Yeah. That's
But
I love
That's
the
common.
idea
That's
of
common.
Changeling, but I love the idea of Changeling, but like trying to wrap my head around that, I was like, what the fuck am I reading?
yeah, I couldn't go near it before, but the way they've done it with this slow rollout of like, okay, we're gonna, start with a core of Vampire the Masquerade. Totally makes sense. Once you got used to that, we're gonna bring in Hunter, which is gonna take a lot of the elements of Vampire, but we're gonna add some interesting new mechanics. Just little ones, nothing overwhelming. Desperation dice, the like. Then Hunter taught you and prepped you for Werewolf, because a lot of the concepts of Vampire and Hunter both transitioned into werewolf. And now werewolf, by the way they did gifts and rights and, you know, the different abilities, the honor system, like the renown system, they're prepping you for mage. They absolutely knew what they were
I'm telling you,
doing
it's like,
when they released
Yeah.
werewolf. When they did, it was to prep you for mage. I have no doubt in my mind that mage is the next supplement to come out. No question. 100%. Next year, I'm guessing, is when we're going to hear about mage. But they have already started to teach you how to play mage through werewolf. They've already started to say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. You're going to have rights and gifts and the like, but they're going to be spells or whatever the hell mage called it. They've been teaching you, and I'm sure it's going to lead to wraith. And mage is probably going to lead to changeling, to be honest, because a lot of those concepts are similar.
I'm telling you, it's like if it's not mage next, it's changeling.
It's mage. It's 100% mage.
I think I'm gonna have to throw my hat.
Mage is the logical one,
because it's especially with Oblivion, with Oblivion and the Cult of the Blood Gods and spirits. I think that they're going to fundamentally work mage up from the ground up, and that's going to take a long time. So I think that in the interim, the quick release is wraith.
It would make sense.
That's where I'm throwing my hat.
That is what I keep hearing, and I'm just like, that one feels a bit out of pocket to me.
Wraith
Hunter
makes sense.
Was out.
Yeah.
I mean, but then again, it's like, oh yeah, they released Hunter, and it's like that was an interesting choice. So I mean, who knows?
But I think
There's been so much Oblivion power work to not pay that off.
Hunter made sense coming after Vampire, because what Vampire 5th edition did was stress the danger of humans. How dangerous humans could be. That humans were the ultimate danger to vampires. They really stressed, you know, humanity. They really stressed keeping the masquerade. They really stressed that, like, if you look at the stats of humans in the end of the vampire book, they're fucking terrifying. They are terrifying.
Oh yeah.
So they built you up to get ready for Hunter, which was a logical next step. What's the opposite of vampires? Hunters. Then werewolves. And I could see in between werewolf and mage, wraith being a minor release on the level of
Hunter level release.
A Hunter level release. Yeah, that it's just like, hey, here's something to hold you over in between werewolf and mage. Because they know people want mage next. Those are the top three. Vampire, werewolf, mage. Those are the top three.
Oh, yeah.
So if they're using those as the pillars between the different systems, they're going to have these little dips where they're going to have little minor systems in the middle. So I think that it's going to be vampire, obviously, hunter, werewolf. It does make sense to have wraith, but I think mage is the next major release, then something, then changeling. Because changeling had a cult following.
They did.
So
we've got Demon the Fallen and Mummy the Resurrection as well, don't forget.
Someone brought that up in chat.
Someone
brought that up in chat. The music was like, no.
I try to forget about Demon constantly.
I'd rather see Kindred of the East before I see Demon or Mummy.
Kindred of the East is interesting.
So we are kind of coming close to the end of our time here. So I'm going to ask you one final question. This has been an amazing conversation, and I'm excited to bring you guys back at various times, whether I'd love to do a solo chat with Damien, a solo chat with Pat. I'd love to do solo conversations with all of you because there's so many more questions I wish I could ask each of you. But my final question tonight would be, what are you most excited for coming up in your future with St. Pete by Night? What are you looking forward to, or what are you eager about going forward with St. Pete by Night, or in this community specifically? Nathan, we'll start with you.
The obvious easiest answer is the big open world that I haven't used it all yet. And that's always a thing that I imagined, like, as that, you know, teenager in a comic book store in the mid-90s. Like, that's what I saw was the big LARP game, right? It's not just a table, it's a big whole world, and I've never gotten to do that before. This is my first time, and I want it. It's
very interesting. It can be very addictive. we've seen that with people playing 16 hours in a day, but it's a cool element about the game.
Oh,
Olive, what are you most looking forward to?
I honestly, I think what I'm looking forward to is just seeing like where this all kind of leads, and kind of like just so like and how like they all intersect, kind of, and it's gonna be interesting, like as it develops, because like oh yeah, it's like we have these like small little things going on right now, but there has to be like something bigger on the horizon that's going to be like, oh, okay.
Well, I will, from behind the scenes, talking to people in front of the scenes, we have spoken as storytellers about world events where all the tables are impacted by a similar event, or bringing back Elysium sessions, which people from the first iteration know are the big world gathering events where everybody could attend. But we are talking about some things that are going to impact werewolf, hunter, and vampire all at the same time. And we're really stressing, especially with the threat tracker, that your small party, your small story can impact the greater world. So if you haven't checked out the threat tracker,
I know that.
yeah, go to
I know that.
stbynight.com/threats. Check that out. The werewolf event that we just had on Tuesday had an impact on the threat tracker. So go check that out. But yes, we are.
I'm almost certain that the events of our last Hunters game had impact.
Quite possibly.
Just because.
But we are, we are talking about grander, bigger world things that do tie everything together. We wanted to start nice and slow and have everybody have their own sections before we started incorporating, but that is in the long-term plan. Damien, what are you most looking forward to with St. Pete by Night?
I sort of kind of agree with some of you. I like the idea of an Elysium, a big Elysium, a salon, a conclave of some kind where we can just get everybody together and talk. I always like political games, and you can't really do combat in a voice chat, but you can do politics.
Yes.
And that really excites me. I am so down for all of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love politics.
Pat, what are you looking forward to most?
I'm gonna rattle some chains here. For all those older characters, for all those sunsetted characters, for all those transferred to SPC characters, we're gonna find your dirt. Our coterie is gonna find your dirt. And we're gonna air it. So you know that. We're looking, we're digging, we're gonna find it. Be ready.
Absolutely. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I really, really wanted to talk to some new players. Mimic brought up the idea, and it blew my mind that we could do it using this After Dark platform. And we appreciate you so much. If you're watching and aren't a part of our community, come check us out. We're at discord.gg/StPeteByNight, or you can find us at stpetebynight.com. It's got links to everything. But this has been an absolute blast. But before we go, we have one more piece of business to handle, which is our dice giveaway. Throughout the night, you could use hashtag DiceMePlease, DiceMePLZ, to be entered into the giveaway. So if you haven't entered it, this is your last chance to do so, to be entered into the giveaway, because I'm going to do the drawing after I do the promotional plugs here. Come join us. stpetebynight.com is the best place to go to find everything. Our streams air there. We've got an upcoming stream this Tuesday, the 5th episode of Rage Across Tampa, where the pack experiences the repercussions of their actions from this last episode. Even the actions they had no control of, they now have to suffer the consequences, or the potential consequences, of what that means. How are they going to deal with Ryder, the Red Talon, who led them into this encounter? What's the deal with Eliza Ross, the Stargazer suffering from Hirano that they are trying to bring back from the brink? And what are they going to do? How are the Kindred of Tampa going to respond to this blatant attack against them? Join us on Rage Across Tampa this Tuesday night at 10 p.m. on Twitch. If you haven't caught up on the episodes, they're all available on our YouTube channel, as well as all of the streams we did in the first iteration. Those are on the YouTube channel as well. But set aside a good chunk of time. There's probably at least 60 some odd hours of content there, maybe more. So really, really prepare to settle in if you're going to go watch the previous stuff. Also, next week on After Dark, we are going to have Cole the ST as our guest on After Dark, where we're going to talk about her experiences with the World of Darkness, her experiences with St. Pete by Night, and some possible information about her currently running stories in the world of Hunter the Reckoning. So check that out. But for now, we're going to make the drawing to determine who won our dice giveaway. Let's see. The winner of this week's dice giveaway is Lakar the Artificer. So congratulations to Lakar for winning this dice giveaway. We will have more dice giveaways in the future, so stay tuned. Also, for those of you who live in the Florida area or are able to travel, KindredCon 2 Electric Boogaloo is going to be taking place in St. Pete, Florida, January 19th through the 21st. So if you haven't made travel plans yet, come and join us for that. There are details on the Discord about that event, so check that out. But thank you, Nathan, Olive, Damien, and Pat. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute blast having you. And I look forward to seeing what you do in the future over here on St. Pete. But for now, I'm Kent. You can find me at Michikent, but that's not important. Go follow St. Pete by Night on all social media, and we will see you next time. Have a good night, everybody.